Alright lads, this is the official carrier tier list for 2023. If we hit at least 1 million views and 50,000 likes, I will make the next one about either submarines or repair ships. I haven't fully made my mind yet. I've gotten a decent amount of suggestions, corrections, opinions and so on in my other videos. And as a man of the people, I've read all of them, and every single one is wrong. Rather than trying to nitpick at my obviously correct tier list and then realizing that you were in the wrong all along after 5 more years of experience, feel free to go and argue with anyone you disagree with in the comments. And I will add the usual disclaimer. If you're a new player who can't recognize ships by their skins yet, then you're not ready for what you're about to see. Here's a quick test. If you recognize the ship, then you have earned the right to continue watching. With that out of the way, I'm now going to give a quick explanation of what each tier means. Starting with the S tier, this is where the best of the best ships are. There exist no replacements that would be a direct upgrade over them. Next up is A tier. In rare occasions, you might want to consider using an A tier ship for what they excel at over an S tier ship, so it is important that they offer something S tier ships don't. In the B tier, you will find a lot of strong damage dealers that are just purely strong but are replaceable. First of all by each other, but also by S and A tier ships. C tier is the cute tier, which should be self-explanatory. And finally, the F tier is for the real stinkers with no redeemable qualities. Now I'm going to be dropping a little bit of lore. In my first tier list series, the carrier one got the most amount of dislikes. And in order to break the record, I'm going to come out swinging by starting with the F tier. And you already know who it's gonna be. Congratulations to Perseus, you are the first ship on the tier list. In fact, with the addition of Perseus, the F tier has evolved into Triple F, aka the F tier. With this, I think I have possibly caused a scratch to my unshakable credibility, at the greater cause of driving away most of the people that I do not want watching my videos anyway. Another candidate that I had for the F tier was Katsuragi, but I don't think she did anything deserving of being in the same tier as Perseus. Alright, let's move on to the S tier. First up is Shinano. Let's see what I said about her in the old tier list. So when we tally up all the buffs, she increases the damage of IJN carriers by over 30%, while increasing the damage of other carriers by a good 15%. And we're not even done with her yet. She also buffs all 3 stats that destroyers want in chapter 14, making her a great option for mob fleets even in the hardest stages of campaign. There are still some things I haven't mentioned, but I think you get it at this point. In fact, I would go as far as to say that she is actually held back by the lack of IJN carriers that are as strong as her, and when they do finally release some more strong IJN carriers, she will only get stronger. A very based take from Jimmy of the past, as is the case for all of his takes. You can go back and listen to the whole thing in the old tier list video if you want. Nothing has changed since then, and therefore she is still the best. Next up is a new addition, Implacable. The reason I have Shinano over her is because you will always bring the ship that contributes the most amount of damage, but you don't always need it slow. However, there is a case for Implacable to be first, because she can be fully utilized to support battleships just as well as carriers, which Shinano can't. However, I'm tired of Kinkora always drawing the same depressed face on every single ship they design, so for me, Shinano will remain on her throne. Next up is Unicorn, the best healer in the game. If you need healing, don't ask, just bring Unicorn. If you use Perseus and Unicorn at the same time, I'm praying for you. Hope you get better soon. Next up is Independence. There are a few things that make her super stand out amongst all carriers. First up is her reload buff, which is super rare and can allow your other carriers to squeeze out an extra airstrike within a given time frame. Next is her anti-air. With her 4 fighters, 4 torpedo bombers that can be either wyverns or brigettes, and an anti-air gun on top of all that, she can function as an actual AA carry. The last part is her insanely high reload, which is extremely potent in campaign stages against both mobs and bosses alike. Not to mention, she has a great crossfleet buff as well. She is always a great asset to have, and pretty much never leaves my Operation Siren and campaign fleets. The last ship in S tier is Ranger. As everyone knows, everything I say is backed up by evidence. It may not seem like it in these tier lists, but trust me. As a special treat for you guys, I will show you evidence that Ranger is easily an S tier ship. Here we have video evidence of Ranger in action. I thought that this video was produced by QC, but apparently it is not QC, so it could be anyone really, even me. I was going to reach out and ask QC for permission to use this video, but since it is someone else, I will just have to pray that not QC is not Sony Entertainment and will ruthlessly strike down my video. You don't want beef with me, Sony. I will put your waifu in FFF. So, as you can see, Ranger is doing well over 1 million damage. And this is not against inflated Algeri meta where the numbers don't even make sense. Find me another carrier doing this type of damage against a single target enemy. You can't. Point proven. Next, we move on to the A tier, starting with Yorktown 2. I think that the only weakness she really has is that her buffs don't affect all USS carriers, but only Yorktown and Essex classes. The fact that she doesn't buff Independence and Saratoga is a huge missed opportunity for her, having more flexibility, and wouldn't even be super OP because her buffs are relatively minor compared to those of Shinano's. And in my opinion, it would make a lot more sense. Manju, if you're listening, please fix this mistake promptly. Next up is Enterprise. She deals the damage. Not as much as Ranger obviously, but it's pretty good. After Enterprise is Aquila. You can use her as a fully powered carrier that comes with a preload, or as a focused protector in situations where one ship is getting heavily focused, like with Musashi in Chapter 14. She is a very flexible ship that can easily earn herself a spot on many different types of fleets. Next up is AVP. She's been largely power crept by Implacable, but she's still the same ship. She should maybe be in B tier, but she's hot so I'll let it slide. Next up is perhaps a slightly controversial placement, Hakuryu. Basically all she's good for is receiving all of Shinano's buffs and taking all the credit. In NBA terms, Shinano is Steph Curry and Haku is Andre Iguodala in the 2015 finals. Next up is Volga. Her damage is not super high and her healing is a little bit random, but it gets better the more ships in your fleet take damage, which incidentally corresponds to more challenging content, making her one of, if not the best option as a secondary healer in challenging content. Next up is Illustrious. Her damage is solid aside from heavy, but not spectacular. Her Vanguard protection allows you to get away with using squishier Vanguards that otherwise would not be possible, which could be useful sometimes. After that is Graf Zeppelin. Basically the same story as Illustrious except limited to Ironblood, which is no longer a meme. And her damage is higher than Illustrious's as well. She also offers backline protection for Ironblood ships, but Seydlitz does a much better job at that. Next up is Saratoga. I haven't even made her augment yet, but the numbers kind of look ridiculous. She outputs almost half an airstrike every 10 seconds, so her total damage probably nearly doubled. Next up are Impero and Ido Akagi. Both of them are used primarily for their ability to desync with typical main fleet cooldowns, but in my opinion they're just worse than Independence. Impero also has the added benefit of being able to keep your main fleet around the same HP, which could be useful in Chapter 14, but I haven't gotten much mileage out of it personally. Next, we move on to the B tier. A bunch of ships in this tier just do a whole bunch of damage, so I won't go into detail with each one if there's no reason to. Starting off with Chkalov, tons of AoE and heavy damage. Then Ark Royal, tons of heavy damage and a useful slow, but obviously not as good as a full root. Then Albion, tons of light and medium single target damage. Then Taiho, pretty much a mini Haku that can serve as a decent substitute. Then Centaur. Her damage is not that great by 2023 standards, but she still buffs your main fleet, is super fast, and also her barrage lags a bit behind her airstrike, so in campaign she can hit multiple waves of enemies in one airstrike. Then Hornet 2, who similar to Albion does a lot of light and medium damage. Then we have the Cranes. Tons of damage, but you need to sortie them as a pair, which is a pain in terms of fleet building, but not for the eyes. Then we have Strasser, who is pretty much a Yorktown 2 wannabe for Iron Blood carriers with her 10% cooldown reduction to airstrikes. Next is Theseus. Pretty good damage against medium and heavy, and please stop calling every girl that has pink hair Bocchi. The final ship in B tier is Ryuho. She doesn't have much of a use after Unicorn retrofit, but I'm still holding on to the hope that her beautiful swimsuit will be released one day. But if it's still not out by next year, then she is out of here. And lastly, we have the ships in C tier. If you're wondering where the meta ships, collab ships, Joffre, Indomitable, and whoever else I left out are, feel free to take a screenshot of the tier list, open MS Paint, and add them in yourself. If you feel an irresistible urge to write a comment about how I'm wrong about X ship, just remember that you're wrong. And that about wraps up the carrier tier list. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.